My name is Dr. Adrian Pabst. I'm a senior lecturer in politics at the University of Kent in Canterbury in southeast England. I come to the Rhodes Forum as a member of the International Coordinating Committee, and in that capacity I either moderate a workshop or chair a plenary panel. I think the greatest immediate threat to human civilization is ISIS. Simply because ISIS is essentially a barbaric force that's trying to defeat civilization. So the fight against ISIS is a battle for civilization. This has got nothing to do with the clash of civilizations, because ISIS does not represent a civilization. It doesn't represent Islam, it doesn't represent the Arab world. It's a demonic force within a certain cultural context that requires coordinated action, because no single country and no single movement can possibly defeat it. When you see pictures of women and children and the elderly being slaughtered, being crucified, bled to death, clearly this is not about just a disagreement, this is not about different values, this is nihilism essentially that we're confronting. And that's why you need some military action, but also of course a long-term plan to deal with the roots of why we have such movements. And essentially we have such movements, I think, because some parts of the world nowadays don't seem to really believe in anything at all. We talk about very general values, but in the end it's hollow. And I think what ISIS responds to is a vacuum. It's a power vacuum and a vacuum of ideas and principles. So we need to confront them militarily where necessary. That means supporting the Kurdish Peshmerga who are fighting against them on the ground. We also need to make sure that over time we can secure territory again, so probably some long-term military involvement. But of course that requires legitimacy. So not a single country can do it. And I think it means that countries that for the moment have been divided and have been divided for a long time need to come together. So the West needs to engage with Iran and the West needs to engage with Russia, because they're the two countries that can actually help on the ground. And I think over time, of course, it means building up institutions that can actually give people jobs, give people security and stability, and make sure that these nihilistic forces cannot take hold in such societies. But essentially, it's a conflict that involves Shia and Sunni Muslims, but of course, a conflict that's also been intensified by outside forces. So there's no point in blaming any one country. There's no point in saying any one country can solve it. It requires consolidated action now and over probably the next 50 years, because this is not a problem that's going to go away. I think lots of extreme forces in the world have different wings, different factions, where maybe you can talk to the political wing but not the military one. You know, some organization like Hamas comes to mind. It's very hard to think that one can really negotiate with the military wing, but the political wing represents a certain ideology that one can engage with. I think in the case of ISIS, this is simply not there. I think ISIS has made it very clear that it will not stop, as the new caliph has said, until its flag flies over Rome. That's a clear declaration of war to anyone who opposes them. There can't be any negotiations with such forces. I think the only way is to defeat them militarily on the ground where they fight, and, as I said, to fill the vacuum which they have tried to capture. So I think dialogue won't work with the force itself, but dialogue will be crucial to bring together a real international coalition that can act. So we need dialogue, but not with ISIS. My sense is that global capitalism, as it currently works, is out of control. It's out of control because it only benefits a tiny, tiny minority. We really are talking about the top 1% in advanced economies. This is very clear when you look at asset inequality. Income inequality is bad enough. The fact that people have such different salaries and that the top salaries are 500 times the bottom salaries. But if you look at assets, what people actually own, the differential is even greater. And there's now a lot of evidence to suggest that inequality does not get better over time, it gets worse. Because the people who have assets and incomes, see their assets and incomes go up exponentially. Why is that? Because basically they can speculate at the margins and make a huge profit, and that profit destabilizes the rest of the economy because it's short-term and speculative rather than about long-term investment. And free movement of capital has only benefited those who already have capital, not those who don't. So we do need to find a way of trying to transform capitalism. Now, I don't think regulation works, because regulation is always a step behind. Most of the times it's 2 steps behind. What you need to do is you need to entangle capital from the outset. That is to say, you need to create a balance of interest within businesses and within an economy. So you need to, for instance, allow workers to be represented on company boards so that their concerns are taken into account every day when the business makes decisions. Regulating capital is always going to try and catch up with something which is already ahead. So, regulation alone won't work. You need to make workers part of businesses. You need to try and create institutions that balance interests, so that from the outset we create more long-term investment and less short-term speculation.